In terms of groups of people that you might specialize in serving, I think that women who have gone through something like that and who are trying to handle these financial tasks, that seems to be the group of people who are most willing to raise their hand and say, I need help, and I need help right now. It's urgent. And they're really appreciative of the help. And they understand, like you can see in front of your eyes the change in their stress level and their demeanor when you can help sort out some of their financial stuff and solve some problems for them that they might seem like something small to us, but to them it's something that is completely consuming them and they can't sleep at night.
Hello everyone, welcome to Bartelle's Money Talk. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Theresa, and today we have Miss Rachael Burns with us. She is a financial planner and whose mission is to assist single women, newly single women. That may be by divorce or it may be by the death of a spouse. So Rachael, welcome to the show, and can you introduce yourself for our audience?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on. So yeah, I'm Rachael Burns. I'm a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst. And I just work with women who are single, unexpectedly, usually, either because their spouse passed away or because they got divorced. And so it's funny, it's not funny, but those two scenarios, even though they're very different, some of the financial decisions and challenges can be very similar. And so that's my specialty, is women who are trying to navigate their finances after this massive life transition.
Okay. So now what got you to the point of going after and supporting single women?
So I've been in the business, so to speak, for almost 20 years now. And I was a general financial planner before. So I didn't have any specialty. I just specialized in people with money. And so I just took whoever came along. And that was fine. You know, there's plenty of people who are in different situations that need financial help, and that was great. But once I had the opportunity to go out on my own and start my own firm, I only wanted to work with women in transition because over the years, whenever I would have a client who was a new widow or a new divorcee, I loved working with them, and I felt like I could make the biggest difference with someone like that. And so when I went independent, I thought, well, I could just work with those people. No one's going to tell me no. I can do whatever I want. So I decided to just work with them. And that was the best thing I ever did. Well, not the best thing I ever did. I think having kids and all, getting married and stuff is better than that. But like career-wise, the best decision I ever made was to specialize just in women in transition.
Wonderful.
Wow. So you say that was one of the best decisions you made. So tell me some of the things that you get out of like helping women that just recently was divorced or recently had a death of a spouse. What are some of the things that you get from?
So what I've found is in terms of groups of people that you might specialize in serving, I think that women who have gone through something like that and who are trying to handle these financial tasks, that seems to be the group of people who are most willing to raise their hand and say, I need help, and I need help right now. It's urgent. And they're really appreciative of the help. And they understand, like you can see in front of your eyes the change in their stress level and their demeanor when you can help sort out some of their financial stuff and solve some problems for them that they might seem like something small to us, but to them it's something that is completely consuming them and they can't sleep at night. And so it's just so rewarding working with that group of people. And there's a lot of people that work with specific niches, and I'm sure they get a similar sense of gratification from that.
Right.
But for me, that's the most gratifying. And I've kind of alluded to this before, but I had a kind of big, scary life transition of my own that certainly played into my career choices that I made afterwards. So right when I found out that I was pregnant with twins, I found out that my husband had brain cancer. And so I went from a married lady with no kids to just planning for the future, I went from planning with my husband to all of a sudden having 2 extra people on the way and one maybe on his way out. Like I didn't know that was like a big, crazy, all these changes happened at once. And it's like, okay, well, how do I move forward having so much uncertainty? And the worst case scenario is like a reality. Like it could happen and the likelihood is high. And so that was such an overwhelming, horrifying experience. And I'm a financial planner. I mean, that's my literal job. And planning for my financial future got really scary, not knowing, okay, what if I am the only one that's able to work? What if I have to support a family of 4? What happens if my husband passes away? Like, what on earth, how does that look? And even with all of my experience, it was still really scary. And I had plenty of other things to worry about at the time. And the last thing I wanted to do was like try to figure out how disability insurance figure out when that kicks in and all these like stupid tasks that come along with like a big diagnosis like that. And I was thinking if I'm this overwhelmed and I have at least the financial part kind of nailed down, like how much worse that would be for someone who doesn't have that kind of financial background. And so I feel like I was lucky in that respect. I also was lucky in that my husband's brain cancer has been in remission ever since, which is like, I can't even tell you how statistically insane that is. That's like, he's a miracle. He really is.
Yes.
And so I was fortunate, even though it was an unfortunate situation, we were fortunate in a lot of ways. And one of those ways was the financial part. And I'm like, that's something I can share with other people who are in similar situations. And it doesn't have to be a diagnosis. It doesn't have to be a death. I mean, there's all sorts of things that we go through in life that are giant, scary transitions and that have a lot of like administrative tasks that go along with it. I mean, even think about getting married, all the administrative tasks that need to be done. And it's like, what? Like, what are we even doing here? But there's people out there who like specialize in helping you through certain things. So that's that. After that, I was like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I've done ever since. And I'm very, very happy to be where I am.
And how old was your husband when you all found out his diagnosis?
He was 31.
Yeah, so I want the listeners to see he was 31. We can be going on with life and think we are untouchable. We can plan for our future, but at any given moment, we can get a surprise that will stump us and change the course of our lives. So again, I just want to say that I am so glad that you've decided to come on and share this story, because a lot of people, they're young and 31, they think they don't need life insurance. So at the time, did you have life insurance? Did your husband have life insurance?
We did. And so my husband worked for an employer and he had employer sponsored benefits basically. And so with those types of insurance policies, they can't boot him off because he's sick. They can't even discontinue his coverage if he stops. Like there were options for us, even if he couldn't work anymore. And so we couldn't get more coverage that would have been nice. But they're like to qualify for the minimum amount of coverage, you didn't have to prove insurability, you didn't have to do anything. But if you wanted to like up it, they would make you do it. So we had a certain amount. It wasn't, in hindsight, we would have had more. But the thing is, like you said, at 31 years old, you're not thinking about, am I going to be diagnosed with a terminal illness tomorrow? Like no one thinks that. I don't care if you're 61 or 31 or whatever, like it can happen to anyone. And I'm not saying that in like a doomsday kind of way, like, oh my God, we could all die at any second. But it's like, no, really, like you have to explore possibilities. You don't have to go down a rabbit hole of every horrible thing that can happen, but you do need to make sure that you're protected and your family is protected in case something goes sideways, whether that's someone getting sick or someone passing away or getting divorced. I mean, that you have to make sure that you're protected in all these scenarios.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Because that I can't imagine. Well, I can't really imagine how that felt and the emotions that you had and probably your husband had, but just for him to be kind of in remission, that's a miracle. So
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
He's I want more. The brain tumor community is very small, and there's people that have benign brain tumors and there's people that have big scary brain tumors. And I feel like my husband is not someone who wants to draw attention to himself ever. But I wish he would, because I feel like if people knew his story, I mean, he's 6 years out from his diagnosis, and the average life expectancy for that tumor is 18 months under kind of the best case scenario, 18 months, and he's at 6 years.
Look, I will say God knows that his family and his babies need him, so he's still here.
Yes.
So that
Don't
was
make me cry.
Yeah, you can make me cry. Yes, but it
Yes.
is true. It's true.
Yeah.
It is a walking miracle.
Yeah.
So Rachel, since you're in this field of helping like people with that had divorce or a death in their family or their spouse, what are some of the common pitfalls that you've noticed while you was kind of going through all some of these financial planning sessions?
So one of the pitfalls that happens in any of those scenarios is they don't want to face the facts. They don't want to look at the numbers. They don't want to talk about it. They want to pretend like it's not there. And so they don't do certain things that they really should be taking care of. And the fact that they wait sometimes can make it turn into a bigger problem. And I totally understand how overwhelming they feel. And I know that the last thing on earth they probably feel like doing is like, oh, I need to make a list of all of my retirement accounts. And, like no one wants to think about that kind of stuff. But there are some relatively time-sensitive things that you need to do when there's been a big change in your life circumstances. And so I think just the big pitfall there is, don't try to bury your head in the sand. If you need to get help, that's totally fine. And there are people who will be happy to help you, whether that's hiring a professional or even just like sitting down with a friend and just being like, hey, can you make sure that I get this done? Can you like harass me until I get this done? Or whatever support you need, ask for help, because the help is there. And the alternative is just not getting it done, and you can end up with bigger problems than what you started with.
Okay. And so if we have someone that's watching this video and they potentially may lose a spouse, like they may have gotten a horrible diagnosis, can you give the listener some immediate things they need to do in the event they do lose a spouse?
I think the first thing to do is just reassess your finances. And if you've never assessed them in the first place, then you don't have to reassess them, just assess them. You need to know what you have. And that's a good exercise for literally anyone, but especially someone who has had a change that impacts their finances. You need to know, where's my money? Where are my bank accounts? What types of investments do I have? Do I even understand how they work? What kind of retirement accounts do I have? What kind of benefits do I have? Life insurance benefits or disability insurance or health insurance benefits. Just all of those, just knowing where things are and what things are is, you'd be shocked at how many people don't have that awareness because maybe someone else has been handling it for them. Maybe, their spouse was handling it. Maybe their parents were handling it. But that's like step number one, is you need to just kind of make a list of what you have, just so you can kind of wrap your arms around it. And then if there's things that you have that you don't understand, that's okay. I would say the majority of people don't understand what a mutual fund is. They don't understand the difference between a 401k and an IRA. You don't have to, you shouldn't feel bad for not knowing that stuff, but it is a good time to figure out the basics, and just you can get someone to help explain that stuff to you, just so that you understand your financial reality.
Okay, I like the way you put that.
Reality.
Right, that's very important. And so, like, if you have a couple, because I know your specialty is women, but we may love you and have a husband too. So if a couple came in to see you, or even a wife came in to see you, do you have like a system that you tell women that they should have in place in the event their husband does pass? Because you know they're going to freak out because it may be suddenly.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have recommendations for women to be able to have something in place so in the event their husband dies suddenly, they know where to go and what to do?
If I had one wish, it would be for every married couple to sit down and make either a binder or even like an online document holder system, where they have just copies of their statements, copies of their tax returns, copies of the beneficiaries on accounts, any will or trust that they've done, just any important financial documents that gets shoved into a drawer, for 20 years. Like if they could just stick all of that stuff in a binder or an online version of that and just have it in one place and ideally have it organized, that would be step number 2. But like just all you have to, and I know it's a little harder because we don't get as many statements in the mail as we used to, but you can still, you still get emails saying, oh, your statement is posted to your account. Just going and you don't have to do it every month, but once in a while, just going and downloading the most recent statements so that at least if something happens to one of them, the other one knows, oh, we have a Charles Schwab account. I should probably call them and figure out what to do with that. If they can just do that. Oh, and another thing is having a list of the bills and like logins.
Oh gosh, that's a big one.
Yes,
oh my gosh. So I have had a client who her husband passed away and he had all of their bills set up on auto pay, which a lot of us do, but it was set up, it was linked to his checking account that was just in his name. So when he died, it got frozen. And so her cell phone bill was being paid from there, her internet, I think her utilities were coming from there. So she had to like call. It was such a nightmare. And this lady had never done anything with the finances, and she'd been married for like 40 years. So if you can just make a list of here's the PG&E login, here's the this, here's the that. And even if, obviously we have to change the passwords every once in a while, and you probably don't feel like going and updating this document all the time. But even if you know, okay, we have a PG&E account. You guys probably don't have PG&E because I'm thinking Pacific. That's what P stands for. I'm
well, we had it
like,
in
what are you
Seattle,
talking about?
We are familiar with it.
Yeah, we had it in Seattle.
Yes.
So, but at least like knowing, okay, we have an account with PG&E and I need to call them and update the password or whatever. Just to know where things are can be so helpful in the event of an emergency or in the event that something happens and you're like, not, you probably, if something bad happens, you're probably not going to have the brain power to want to try that hard to track this stuff down.
You won't. And so like what I want to ask you, like after you got the news about your husband, you already are pregnant with twins. Okay, the dust has settled. When you sit back and you look back on that time, is there anything that you learned that you could tell the listeners that you wish you would have had in place prior to getting that news?
That's a really good question. I don't know that there was anything more that we could have had in place that would have made it easier because it was just such a difficult situation. I think we had done the basic things. We had life insurance. We had a will and trust, which I've been told at the time that I was like the youngest person that anyone knew that had a trust and will. By the way, you don't know
what? That's a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And by the way, trusts are not just for rich people. Trusts, are for a lot of people who just care about what happens to their stuff and their, when they die. So but being in the business, I'm like, oh, I have to have a will and trust, like even when I'm in my 20s. So like we had all those things in place. Like on paper, we had done all the right things, but nothing prepares you for that type of event. And I don't know that there was anything more we could have done. We just survived it as best we could with the preparations that we had.
Okay, that's good information though, because someone 31 may be listening to us and they have not even a will, nothing.
Yeah.
And so listening to you, and you had all this stuff in place when you were 31 and you were married, you were taken care of. So you had, even though you were devastated, at least your financial part
Yeah.
was in order, because if you would have had to deal with your finances and the potential loss and twins.
That would have been hard.
Yeah. Like if I was like, what if I didn't know about our life insurance? Like, how would I
Mhm.
even go about figuring that out? Do I call his employer? Like, how that would have been such a nightmare. But we had already kind of organized that information. And so it was just like one less thing to worry about.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then because you mentioned wills, can you give some advice about power of attorneys, like when people should have power of attorneys?
Yes. So there are so many misconceptions when it comes to estate planning documents.
Mhm.
So think about this scenario. Let's say you're single, and let's say you get hit by a car and you can't speak, and you're in a coma or something.
Mhm.
And let's say you're single. So who is in charge at that point of making medical decisions? And who is in charge of paying your bills and just doing the day-to-day stuff that has to happen, even if you're in a hospital bed?
Mhm.
And maybe to you, it might be super obvious, like, well, obviously I would have my mom do that. Or
Mhm.
maybe another person would say, well, obviously it would be my best friend who would do that.
Mhm.
But if you're not there to say, this is who I want doing that, that person may not know that you want them to do it. There might be multiple people who think that they should be in charge.
Oh
They
yes.
might pick the absolute wrong person. Like, what if you
Mhm.
have a cousin that you just like hate, and somehow they're in charge of deciding whether or not to pull a plug on you? Like,
That's true.
you have to specify those things. And it's not that crazy of a scenario to where you would need someone to help make medical or financial decisions for you. Like, all it takes is you step outside and something falls on
Yes.
your head or something. I mean, that could happen.
Yes.
And so powers of attorney are so important. And if as long like once you have that in place, you don't have to think about it until
Mhm.
you change. If you changed your mind about who you wanted to have in charge, you
Mhm.
can always change it, by the way. But
Mhm.
like these might seem like things that you shouldn't have to worry about, but like you just worry about it for like a minute, get it done, and then seriously don't think about it. It's not something that needs to take up mental space after that.
Okay.
I like
Okay.
that.
I like that too.
Not take up mental space.
Yeah.
So we talked about all the things that was like priority. What are some things that you would consider not necessarily priority or urgent when you're thinking about?
Yeah, that's a good one. So, when I meet people who are dealing with, something just happened, they just separated or someone just passed away, and they're like, "Oh, well, I need to change my investments." I'm like, "No, you don't." Like,
Oh,
or
okay.
sometimes they'll want to. So here's an example: someone who is newly widowed,
Mhm.
and they might say, "Oh my gosh, my spouse just passed away last month. I have got to sell the house and move back east to be near my sister or something."
Uh-huh.
And there are certain things that you can't put off and certain things that have to be taken care of right away, but there are certain things that don't need to be taken care of and really shouldn't be taken care of until you have some time to settle down
Mhm.
and kind of acclimate to your new situation. You don't want
Mhm.
to be making big decisions about changes in where you're going to live,
Mhm.
or making decisions about, I'm going to loan a bunch of money to my kids, or, there's like, unless the tasks are very, very urgent, I really encourage people to put them off. And that might not be what people expect me to say sometimes, but you really want to be easy on yourself when you're going through hard times, and you
Mhm.
don't want to pile on more work than you need to.
Mhm.
And you're probably not going to do a great job at it at that point anyway. So why not
Mhm.
just give yourself some space to like calm down? Not that
Mhm.
people are hysterical, but like
A lot
don't
of
even
time.
don't even do that to yourself. Don't even make yourself
Mhm.
like work too hard. And
Mhm.
so anything that you can put off, what I encourage people to do is like, let's make this into a list in order of priority. So
Mhm.
priority number one, make sure the bills are being paid. Number two, make sure that I have a good enough understanding of income, my income coming in and the expenses going out, making sure that's good. Number three, make sure that I have my own estate planning stuff in place, because something can happen to one. I mean, how many people do you know where one spouse passes away and a week later the other spouse passes away? I mean, that happens like kind
Yes,
of
it
It
does.
often.
does. It
And
does.
so, make a list in order of priority. And the stuff that's on the bottom, don't even look at it. Don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do anything. But like that way you just look at one thing at a time. Just look at the top thing, get that done when you can, then cross it off and then look at the next thing. And then it's just less overwhelming. And you'll also be able to make even better decisions about the things that are lower on the list if you give it some more time.
So Rachel, and what I heard is more time. So what would you recommend, like a time frame for somebody who went through something like a dramatic experience like this? I mean, what's the time frame that you would recommend?
It depends on the person because the scenario is different and then just people are different and the way that they process grief or the way that they work through problems. I mean, some people just get so hysterical and they just can't do anything. And then some people, it's like they're totally unfazed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that one is bad and one's not. It's just people are just different in how they deal with stuff. And so I don't know like what time frame people should have to get things done or to get through
Mm-hmm.
these different phases. I think it just depends.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel like I'm not ready to even deal with this and I feel like I should be ready at this point, it's okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
you set your own schedule. There's no like grief is not
Mm-hmm.
a linear thing. It's not like, oh, it's been 6 weeks, therefore I'm ready to move on to this phase. It's like it's all
Mm-hmm.
over the place.
Right.
So yeah. So don't uh beat yourself up if you're not on schedule, so to speak.
Okay. All right.
That's
And
good.
that's a good thing. And
That's good.
so,
Mhm.
leaning off of that, what would you tell a woman? How would she estimate about how much life insurance her husband should have? Do you offer like a percentage? Can you talk on that just a little bit?
So what I ask people in that scenario is I start kind of big picture and I say, okay, in the unfortunate event that something happens to this person, what
Mm-hmm.
are your goals for the survivor? Do you want them to be able to pay off the house so that they don't have a mortgage payment?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to give them enough money so that they never have to work for the rest of their life? Do you
Wow.
want to have enough money set aside so that each of the kids can go to college?
Mm-hmm.
People have different goals in mind for, like, if you think of, I want to take care of my family if I die,
Mm-hmm.
that could mean different things to different people. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to think about, well, what are my goals for the survivors?
Yes.
And what do those things cost?
Right.
And sometimes people have simple things that they would want, and some people have more life insurance than they need. Some
Mm-hmm.
people have less than they need. It just depends on what you want to accomplish with your insurance. Um, but life insurance is actually fairly inexpensive. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no good reason to not go through this exercise, like figure out what you need and then see what it costs to get that, because it's probably not that much.
Right.
And you don't have to keep it in place for longer than you need it. So for example, if your goal is, I just want to have enough money so that my spouse doesn't have to work until the kids are out of the house,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say you make it to where all your kids are over 18 and you're like, okay, we don't have that concern anymore. We can just let the life insurance go and you don't have to keep paying it. You can keep paying it if you wanted to keep it, but it's very flexible.
Okay, good. All right, because I'm sure someone might be thinking, well, how much insurance should we have? So that was a great example because they can, run through the things and see what they need. It really, too, what are your goals in the case you do die? What do you want
Yeah,
for your spouse? So thank you, too, for sharing that information.
you're welcome.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna tag on with the husbands now. That would apply to the husbands as well. I mean, because even if your spouse that passes or divorces your wife, then the same thing would apply to the husband. So thank you.
Either side. So let's say that one of the spouses stays at home with the
Mm-hmm.
kids.
Mm-hmm.
There might still be a need for life insurance, even though that person isn't earning an income, so to speak.
Right.
Because okay, so let's say you have little kids and you have a stay-at-home spouse, and if something happens to them, you still have to work.
Mm-hmm.
Childcare costs a fortune. Like
Yeah,
Yes.
maybe you just have enough insurance to cover childcare. I mean, it could just be like a $50,000 policy, or it can be a small amount of money, but then it's just something you don't have to worry about once it's in place.
Right. That is peace of mind. I mean, because eventually all of us are going to die. And it's a very tough decision to talk about, especially in your situation. But I'm glad that we are able to have this conversation. But I also want us to help the divorcees or the people who might be potentially thinking about divorces, because you are a certified divorce financial analyst. So I do want to touch on that just a few minutes. And so can you tell women what they can do to prepare financially if they're planning in their mind that they want to get a divorce? What do they need to do to prepare?
Yeah. So this advice applies to men and women. I think if you haven't been divorced before, and if you don't work in the divorce industry, you probably don't know how exactly divorce works. I don't think anyone really does. Like, it's a really complicated, really weird process, and it's different from state to state. And like, no one is expecting you to know what this is going to look like going into it. And so what I encourage people as early as possible, ideally before, like, if it's your idea to get divorced, before you even tell the other person, you really have some homework to do. And one is just getting an idea of what your finances look like. Because if you were the spouse, if you weren't the one that was in charge of the finances, and if you're like, oh, I just let my spouse handle the financial stuff, and if you have no idea what you have and you're going into a divorce, that's going to make it infinitely more stressful, not knowing what to expect with the finances. So I think getting a grasp on your finances as a couple, and it might be kind of a hard homework assignment. You might have to like look through statements that you can find, or you might have to look through tax returns, and your spouse might be like, why are you looking at that? And you might like, it's a super weird thing, but like, you need to be informed. And however you get that information, don't do anything illegal or sneaky, but like, you're going to have to find this information. Otherwise, you're going to be just jumping into this, having no idea where you're going to land. And then the second step, once you kind of know what you have, you need to get an idea of how things kind of work when it comes to splitting assets in divorce. Because I would say the majority of people that I meet with are completely wrong in their assumptions. Like, oh, well, I should get more because my ex did these horrible things. I'm like, well, this is a no fault state. That's not how you don't get more money because he's a whatever.
We can come up with a lot of words.
Fill in the blank. And it goes the other way too. But like, I hear a lot of assumptions. Well, I get this because this, or he gets this because, like, the most common thing I hear is, well, he was the one that was saving in his retirement account, and it's in his name, so he says I don't get any of it. And I'm like, that's not how that works. But like, imagine not knowing any of that and going into this process and just assuming that, well, I'm not going to get anything. And he says he's not going to pay me child support, so I'm not going to get that. So I guess I'm going to have to stay forever, or I'm going to have to run off to Mexico or something. Like,
that's the problem.
You have to know what to expect a little bit. And what I recommend, and it's not always what people think is the best option, but just schedule a consultation with an attorney. Even if you have no plans to go to court, or even if you don't even want to have attorneys representing you, like, you can get your legal questions answered, and maybe it costs you a little bit of money to have a quick consult, or better yet, call a certified divorce financial analyst, because my job is to explain the financial aspects of divorce. And I don't charge nearly as much as an attorney charges. And I just do the money stuff. So I'm not getting involved in custody or this or that. I just deal with splitting the money. But I can explain, this is kind of vaguely how it works. And we don't know exactly what's going to happen in your situation, but I can kind of give you an idea of what that might look like. And for some people, if they're considering divorce and they come to me before they've done anything, they're like, oh, that's not what I was expecting to hear. That's really, that's a lot better than I was expecting, or maybe it's worse. I don't know, but they at least go into the divorce process having more information and more power.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, I think a lot of people who probably go down that path probably would consider, can I get this, or would a property be split this away? So you're absolutely correct on that. But what if like a spouse, two spouses go into this divorce path, and one of the spouses determined that, hey, you know what? I thought I actually was getting this, but I really can't afford to get divorced. Then what?
Are
Then
they stuck?
yeah, are they like, oh, I can't go nowhere?
So it's interesting because some people do come to that conclusion. And and I always try to help people see that like you're not forced into staying married because of money stuff. Like that's not usually, people aren't usually actually trapped. And if they are, that's like a really tragic thing. But what people don't realize is if if they go through with it, their lifestyle might change pretty drastically.
Oh,
So
yes.
maybe they're used to living at this level and they're going to have to live at this level. And maybe that's not, for some people, they'd be like, I'll take it. I'll go, I'll live in a 200 square foot apartment. I don't care. I'm just happy to be away from my ex. And some people are like, no, I'm not giving up the house. I'm not giving up the vacation. So I'm just going to tough it out until the kids are out of school or something like that. I hear all sorts of people who have that decision-making process. And it's funny, the people that I hear saying that they can't afford to get divorced, who actually will stay married because of strictly financial reasons, are wealthier people, because divorce costs more money for wealthier people.
Right.
It's like if you're used to, I don't know, if you're used to having this much money, it's just harder to, I don't know. It's funny to me to hear wealthier people saying, well, I can't afford to get divorced. And I'm like, of all people, you're the one that can afford it. But it just has a bigger impact, I think, when it's like higher dollars that are involved. It's interesting.
Right. They don't want the lifestyle change. So, husband, I will put up with you so I can find dime whenever I want to.
And it's not like, so I do these monthly workshops, like free workshops for people who are, and a lot of those people have not filed, they're just considering divorce. And some people, when they come in and they hear about what the process entails, sometimes they decide not to go through with it. And it's not because we're scaring them, but like some people are like, you know what? This is not an easy process, and it's worth it to explore every other option before you take that kind of last resort option, because it's not pretty. I mean, for a lot of people it's worth it, and that is the only option for some people. But when some people see what it actually entails, they're like, no, I'll just sleep in separate bedrooms or something. I'll just get another job so I'm not around the house or something. Like, it's interesting.
That is interesting. But you know what, Rachel? I am so glad that we brought this up, because I don't know what the statistics are, but you probably do. But divorce rate now is high, very high. And so I think it's important that you mention these things so that people know it's not just, I'm going to get a divorce.
No, it's not quick. It's not easy. It's not, even if you don't do attorneys, it still costs money, more money than you'd think. And then you're splitting up half of the assets. Like it's not a easy thing. It's not something to take lightly. Like aside from all the, moral stuff or whatever, but just strictly looking at the process, it's not something to take lightly.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. And so, but what if we got this single young lady? She was able to make it and she survived the divorce. What do you recommend for her to get in place to make sure she has her financial life in order?
So when the divorce is over and okay, this is what I have to work with. This is my share of the assets. Then it's kind of similar to what we talked about before. You have to reassess, make a list of what you have. If there's something you don't understand what it is or how it works, you got to figure that out. You can Google it, you can ask someone, you can hire someone. And then once you know, okay, this is my current situation. I understand my current situation. Well, what are my goals now? Because things have changed. I'm single now. What are my goals? Get specific about those goals. and it's hard, especially if your previous goals were, as like, well, we're a married couple and we want to do these things together and we want to retire together and blah blah blah.
Mhm.
Then you're all of a sudden single, your goals change, and it's kind of hard to come up with new goals, but you do want to spend some time thinking about, what am I trying to accomplish here? And then when you look at, okay, these are my goals and this is where I am now. Well, how do I get from here to there? That part takes some strategizing, but you can figure it out. There are online calculators to figure out, how much do I need to save for retirement? There are calculators that help you figure out, how much of an emergency fund do I need? How much life insurance do I need? Like, you can kind of go through one by one and figure out, okay, what do I need to do to make sure I'm on track? And you can figure it out yourself again, or you can get help. But it's just like getting organized, setting goals, and then figuring out a to-do list of what you need to do so that you are making progress towards your goals.
That was beautiful.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Rachel, before we actually close out here, I want you to give the listeners a couple of tips, a couple of recommendations that you think that would be nuggets to them if they are facing a divorce or either a death in there with their spouse. A couple of tips.
So what I would say is, I have a few things.
Wonderful.
One is, don't feel like you need to figure everything out at once. And you're not expected to be an expert in your situation that you've just found yourself in. If you're if you're newly divorced or you're newly widowed, you're not expected to be an expert on financial stuff for widows. Like, it's okay that you're feeling vulnerable and feeling like overwhelmed by all the stuff that you had to worry about. So no one's expecting you to be an expert, so don't expect that yourself to be an expert, and just give yourself some grace there. Two, because there's a lot of things that you'll probably need to learn. And this is even if you're not in that type of situation, even if you're just chugging along in life. I think it's important for every person to know what their preferred learning style is. If you're someone who loves to read books, or if you're someone who loves to read or listen to podcasts, or if you like to have someone sit down and explain it to you, I think figuring out, this is the best method that I can take in this information. I think that really helps, because what I hear people say is like, well, I don't even know where to start learning about finances. And I'm like, start anywhere. Like, listen to a podcast. There's podcasts that start from the most basic financial stuff that go all the way up to how to invest in Bitcoin or all these kind of more exotic things. And if podcasts are your thing, then there are a million resources there for you that are so easy to find. Or if they're books. I've been going to the library down the street lately, and I'm so entertained just going and picking books. Like, kind of forgot about libraries. But if that's your thing, wander into the library and go in the finance section, and there's a gazillion different books there. And like, if you look at learning as, this doesn't have to be this giant challenge. This can be something that I'm literally doing as I'm doing laundry, or I'm in the car driving the kids to school. Like, I can be learning little bits in the meantime. Those little bits add up, and it's so much more manageable and approachable when you look at it like that.
Okay.
Nice.
Excellent.
Yes. Well, Rachel, thank you for joining Bartelle's Money Talk. We really enjoyed the conversation and the content that you provided. You were like awesome. So thank you very much. And listeners, if you like our content, please like, share, and subscribe for more fresh content. And we look forward to seeing you on Bartelle's Money Talk again. Thank you.
And before we close, I need Miss Rachael Burns to tell the audience how to find her.
Sure. So you can visit my website at trueworthfp. So it's F as in Frank, P as in Paul.com. My website is the best place to go. There's a big button on the top right where you can book a free consult. I'm on social media. I'm not super consistent with it. That could be a place to kind of look for. You can see some content that I posted, but I would say the website is the best place to go. And I really appreciate you guys having me on. This is so much fun.
Wonderful. Yes. It was, and I am sure that your information is going to bless a newly single woman. So again, thank you, Rachael, for joining us on Bartelle's Money.